They thought her silence meant weakness. They were wrong. Tonight, the man who believed he was discarding a useless housewife was about to discover he'd just divorced the CEO of the very empire he was desperate to join. The dining room of the Harrington estate stretched cold and vast, despite the fire crackling in the corner. It was the kind of cold that lived in the bones, born not from temperature, but from the people seated around the mahogany table. Victoria sat at the far end, hands folded in her lap, wearing a navy dress she'd bought at H&M 3 years ago for $49. Clean, pressed, modest. Against the backdrop of the Harrington family's wealth, it looked like a rag. Diane Harrington's voice sliced through the quiet like a blade through silk. "Victoria, must you slouch? We're celebrating Marcus's promotion to VP of Corporate Development. Try to look less like the help." Marcus didn't glance up from his iPhone. 35 years old, sharp jawline, the kind of polished charm that worked in boardrooms but curdled into indifference at home. His fingers moved across the screen with practiced efficiency, likely texting his team. Or so he claimed. Victoria straightened her spine, the movement careful, measured. "I'm proud of you, Marcus. 2 years of hard work. 2 years of his hard work." Diane set her wineglass down with a sharp clink. "And 2 years of you doing what exactly? Reading paperback novels? Honestly, Marcus, I don't know how you tolerate coming home to such stagnation. A man of your caliber needs a power couple dynamic." Victoria bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted copper. Her iPhone buzzed against her thigh beneath the table. She glanced down at the screen just long enough to read the subject line. "Board emergency. Zenith acquisition approval needed. Decision in 24 hours. Her thumb moved to silence the notification. No one noticed. They never noticed. Marcus finally spoke, though his tone carried all the enthusiasm of a man discussing weather. "Mom, leave her alone, she tries." The backhanded defense stung worse than the insult. Victoria's fingers tightened around the linen napkin in her lap until her knuckles went white. "I have ambition, Marcus. I manage the house. I support you." "You manage a household with 3 maids." Marcus let out a short laugh, still not looking at her. "Let's be real, Tori. You're a passenger in this life. I'm the pilot. And right now the pilot is stressed because the merger with Zenith Global is stalling." Victoria's heart skipped. Zenith, her company. Marcus had been trying to secure a partnership with one of her subsidiaries for months. He'd been rejected 3 times because his proposals were sloppy, arrogant, lacking substance. She had personally red-flagged his file. Anonymously, of course. She kept her voice carefully neutral. Maybe Zenith wants to see more integrity in the proposal, more transparent supply chain audit. "I read in the Wall Street Journal that..." The table went silent. Then Diane burst out laughing, a harsh sound that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "Oh, listen to her. The housewife is giving corporate advice. Marcus, darling, did you hear? She thinks she knows what a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate wants." Marcus shook his head, finally meeting Victoria's eyes with something that looked like pity. "Tori, sweetie, business strategy is complicated. Stick to the grocery list, okay?" 2 weeks ago, Victoria had sat at the head of a different table. 42nd floor of Zenith Global's Manhattan headquarters. Charcoal Armani suit, hair pulled into a severe bun, diamond sun brooch gleaming on her lapel. The presentation screen had read, "Silvercrest Industries, Proposal Number 3, Recommendation, Reject." Her voice had been ice. Harrington's third proposal still lacks substance. The market analysis is plagiarized from a McKinsey report. Red flagged this file permanently. Arthur Pendleton, her lead counsel, had glanced up from his notes. "Permanently, Madam Chairman?" "He's sloppy. Sloppy people are liabilities." Now, watching Marcus dismiss her with casual cruelty, Victoria felt the ghost of that other self stirring beneath her skin. The self who commanded rooms. The self who made grown men in $1,000 suits sweat. Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and something shifted in his expression. A smile, small, private. He typed back quickly, then set the phone face down on the table. Victoria had excellent vision. Even from her position at the far end, she'd caught the contact name, AV, and the message preview, "Can't wait for Friday night, baby. This is finally happening. Wear the red dress." The dinner continued. Diane pontificated about the importance of appearances, about the Vanderbilts and the Rothschilds, about how Marcus deserved better. Marcus nodded along, occasionally throwing in agreement. Victoria endured it the way she'd endured everything for 2 years, by holding on to the memory of who he'd been before success corrupted him. Or perhaps that was a lie she told herself. Perhaps he'd always been this way, and she'd simply been too desperate for family to see it. The dessert arrived, chocolate soufflé. Victoria had made it herself that afternoon, following the recipe her foster mother had taught her 20 years ago. Diane didn't touch it. Marcus cleared his throat, checking his Rolex. "I have an announcement. Beyond the promotion." Victoria looked up. For one fragile moment, something in her chest loosened. Maybe he was going to suggest a vacation, a chance to reconnect, a sign that somewhere beneath the corporate ambition, the man she'd married in a Brooklyn courthouse still existed. "I've met someone." His eyes locked onto hers, and there was no warmth in them, only ice. "Someone who understands my ambitions. Amber Vanderpool. Her father is Richard Vanderpool, CEO of Vanderpool Capital. She's connected. She gets me, Tori. She speaks my language." The words landed like physical blows. Victoria felt the blood drain from her face, felt the room tilt slightly, felt every carefully constructed wall she'd built around her heart crack down the middle. "What are you saying, Marcus?" "I'm saying I've outgrown you." His voice was flat, matter of fact, as if he were discussing a business transaction. "I need a wife who fits the future I'm building, not a relic from my past." Diane clapped her hands together, actually clapped, delight spreading across her face like poison. "Finally! I told you, Marcus. I told you 2 years ago." Marcus reached into his blazer and pulled out a thick envelope. He slid it across the polished mahogany table. It stopped next to the untouched soufflé, white paper gleaming under the chandelier's crystal teardrops. "I want a divorce, Tori, and I want you out of the house by tomorrow morning." Victoria stared at the envelope. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the sound of Diane humming something satisfied as she finally took a bite of the dessert. "You're kicking me out?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "After everything? I supported you when you were an intern, Marcus. I paid our rent when you couldn't." "That was a long time ago." He waved his hand as if swatting away a fly. "I paid you back for that rent 10 times over with the jewelry, the car. We're square." Square. Victoria stood slowly. Her legs felt unsteady, but something else was beginning to ignite in her stomach. Something cold and sharp and focused. "Marriage isn't a transaction, Marcus." "Everything is a transaction." He tapped the envelope. "Sign the papers. I'm being generous. You get the apartment in Queens and a lump sum of $50,000. That's more than enough for someone with your limited skill set." $50,000. It was an insult. It was less than what Victoria made in interest every 6 hours. Less than she'd spent on the Patek Philippe watch currently sitting in her penthouse safe. "And if I don't sign?" Marcus's face darkened. "Then my lawyers will destroy you. They'll paint you as a gold digger. They'll drag this out until you don't have a dime left for coffee. Amber has already introduced me to her family's legal team at Sterling and Cooper." "You can't win, Tori." Amber. The name hung in the air like smoke. Victoria's intuition flared. Is she here? Waiting in the car. Marcus stood, buttoning his suit jacket without a shred of shame. "We have a gala at the Metropolitan Museum. Real networking. Something you wouldn't understand." Victoria looked at Diane, who was now scrolling through her iPad, already searching for vacation homes in the Hamptons. She looked at Marcus, the man she'd loved, now twisted into something unrecognizable. The sadness that had weighed on her for 2 years suddenly lifted, replaced by crystalline clarity. She reached for the envelope. "I'll read them, but I have conditions. You're in no position to make demands." Victoria's voice came out stronger now, firmer. "The meeting to finalize the divorce must happen at a neutral location. Next Friday, 10 in the morning." Marcus sighed, already halfway to the door. "Fine, my lawyer's office. Don't be late." "No." The word cut through his movement. "Not your lawyer's office. I want to meet at Zenith Global Headquarters, Executive Conference Room, floor 42. Marcus froze mid-step. He turned slowly, confusion creasing his brow. "Zenith? How the hell would you get access to? Do you know a janitor there?" Victoria kept her face carefully neutral. "I have a friend in HR. She booked a conference room for me so I can have legal counsel present without paying for office space. It's the only way I'll sign." Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. A harsh, barking sound. "You have a connection at Zenith? Probably cleans toilets." He smirked at his mother. "Fine, if you want to be humiliated in the lobby of the biggest company in the city, be my guest. Maybe seeing real success up close will show you exactly what you're losing." "Maybe it will." Victoria clutched the envelope, her knuckles white against the paper. Marcus turned toward the foyer without offering a goodbye. Victoria listened to his footsteps echo on the marble, heard the front door open and close, heard the roar of his Aston Martin engine. Through the bay window, she saw a blonde woman in the passenger seat. Red dress, perfect makeup. Amber Vanderpool looked like a shark wrapped in silk. Victoria waited until the taillights disappeared down the tree-lined driveway. Then she turned to Diane. "I'm leaving now." "Good riddance." The older woman didn't look up from her iPad. "Leave the keys on the front table, and don't take the silverware." Victoria walked out into the October night. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and approaching rain. She didn't go to the garage where her Honda Civic sat gathering dust. Instead, she walked down the long driveway, her cheap shoes clicking on the asphalt. Halfway to the main road, headlights flickered to life in the darkness ahead. A Bentley Mulsanne, midnight blue, emerged from the shadows like a predator. The rear door opened before she reached it. Sebastian Cross stepped out. 52 years old, impeccable charcoal suit, silver hair perfectly groomed. Former Wall Street analyst turned chief of staff. His American accent was crisp, professional, concerned. "Good evening, Madam Chairman. Rough dinner?" Victoria felt the mask slip away. The meek housewife dissolved, replaced by the woman who'd built a $38 billion empire from nothing. Her voice changed completely. Lower, authoritative, absolute. "The marriage is over, Sebastian. Initiate protocol nightfall." His eyes widened fractionally. "Nightfall? That's scorched earth. Full hostile takeover, public exposure, financial destruction. Are you certain?" Victoria slid into the plush leather interior. The car smelled of expensive leather and faint jasmine. She looked back at the Harrington estate one last time, at the warm lights glowing in the windows, at the illusion of family she tried so desperately to maintain. They wanted a transaction. I'm going to give them the most expensive transaction of their lives. "Very good, ma'am. Where to?" "The penthouse. I have a war to plan." The Bentley pulled away in silence, eating up the distance between Greenwich and Manhattan with predatory efficiency. Victoria closed her eyes, but she wasn't tired. Her mind was already 3 moves ahead, calculating, strategizing, preparing. 8 months ago, she'd stood in a different bathroom, private suite at the penthouse she maintained separately from the Harrington residence. The pregnancy test had shown 2 pink lines, clear and unmistakable. 12 weeks along. She'd smiled for the first time in months, a real smile, fragile as glass. She'd planned to tell Marcus that night, had rehearsed the words, had imagined his reaction, hoped desperately that a child might bridge the growing chasm between them. He'd come home at 11:30, bourbon on his breath, unfamiliar perfume on his collar. She'd started to speak. "Marcus, I need to tell you something. It's good news." "Not tonight, Tori. I'm exhausted." Then, as if talking to himself, or perhaps to the ghost of his own ambition, he'd added, "If you got pregnant, I'd be trapped forever with mediocrity. I can't. I need to climb higher." He'd walked to the bedroom and closed the door. 3 days later, Victoria had collapsed at her Zenith office. Sudden, violent cramping. Blood. Sebastian had called a private ambulance, gotten her to Mount Sinai's VIP wing without alerting anyone. The doctor's voice had been kind but clinical. "I'm sorry, Ms. Blake. Miscarriage at 12 weeks. Stress can be a contributing factor." Victoria had lain in the hospital bed, staring at her phone. 0 missed calls from Marcus. He thought she was at a spa resort, just as she'd told him. A convenient lie. He hadn't checked in once. Her finger had hovered over his contact. She'd almost called. Almost. Then she'd remembered. Trapped forever with mediocrity, she deleted his number instead. For 6 months after that, Victoria had functioned on autopilot. 16-hour days at Zenith, running a global empire while dying inside. She'd avoided the Harrington estate, sleeping at her penthouse, making excuses. Marcus never questioned her absences. He was too busy climbing. 2 months ago, she'd found the text messages. Not even hidden well, just there on the iPad they'd once shared, messages syncing automatically. Marcus and someone named AV discussing dinners, hotels, futures. That's when she'd started Protocol Nightfall. The Bentley arrived at 157 Tower. Victoria took the private elevator to her penthouse, keying in the code that only she and Sebastian knew. The doors opened directly into her foyer. Gone was the woman in the H&M dress. Victoria stripped it off in the walk-in closet, letting it fall to the marble floor like shed skin. Underneath, simple black tank top and underwear. She stood there for a moment, looking at the racks of designer suits she hadn't worn in 2 years. Saint Laurent, Armani, Dior, all waiting. She selected a charcoal pantsuit, Saint Laurent. Sharp lines, perfect tailoring, Louboutin heels. When she looked in the mirror, she saw the CEO staring back. The war room was already set up. 4 assistants waiting with tablets and espresso. Arthur Pendleton, her lead counsel, silver-haired and ruthless. Linda Martinez, her CFO, sharp-eyed and efficient. 2 financial analysts whose names Victoria had committed to memory because good leaders remembered everyone. She sat at the head of the glass conference table. Initiate Protocol Nightfall. Full execution. Arthur's concern showed in the tightness around his eyes. "Victoria, that's total warfare. Hostile takeover, public humiliation, financial annihilation. You're absolutely certain?" "Marcus offered me $50,000. She let that hang in the air. "My dividend last quarter was $140 million. He mistook kindness for weakness. Time for a correction." Linda pulled up a spreadsheet on the main screen. Phase 1 is complete. Over the past 8 weeks, using 12 shell companies, we've acquired 31% of Silvercrest Industries stock. Total cost, $240 million. Victoria nodded. Every transaction had been calculated to stay below the SEC's 5% reporting threshold. Small bites, invisible to anyone not looking for a pattern. Phase 2 begins now. We need another 20% to hit 51% controlling interest. That's the majority. That's everything. Arthur frowned. Difficult. The major shareholders aren't going to sell easily. They're loyal to George Mitchell. Offer a 35% premium above current market price. Private deals. Close everything by Thursday night. Victoria's voice left no room for negotiation. I authorize up to $400 million. The analyst started typing immediately, running numbers, identifying targets. Phase 3, intelligence gathering on Amber Vanderpool and her father, Richard Vanderpool. The first analyst, a young woman named Rebecca, looked up from her tablet. Amber claims a Harvard Law degree, class of 2018. We're verifying with the registrar's office. The second analyst, David, added, Richard Vanderpool has suspicious offshore activity. We're following the money trail through Delaware and beyond. Phase 4, Marcus's secrets. Arthur slid a folder across the table. Forensic accounting has uncovered gambling debts. Atlantic City casinos primarily. Total exposure, $3.2 million. Linda's eyebrows rose. How does someone with a $280,000 salary cover $3 million in debt? Arthur opened another file. Secondary mortgage on the Harrington estate, $3.8 million loan from Bank of America. The problem is the signature. He passed Victoria a handwriting analysis report. Diane Harrington's signature on the loan documents is forged, 94% certainty. Victoria studied the report. The pieces were falling into place like dominoes. So Marcus thought the $5 million bonus from the Zenith deal would cover his gambling debts before Diane discovered he'd mortgaged her house. Exactly, a desperate man making sloppy choices. Linda slid a new file across the table. About Amber Vanderpool, Harvard's registrar confirmed this afternoon. No enrollment record, ever. Her law degree is completely fabricated. Victoria absorbed this without surprise. Liars attracted liars. And Richard Vanderpool? She already knew the answer from the tension in Arthur's shoulders. We found a Delaware shell company linked to $12 million that went missing from a construction workers' pension fund in 2019. The FBI has a preliminary investigation open. Our forensic team traced the money, Delaware LLC, to offshore accounts, then converted to Richard's personal real estate holdings. Victoria stood, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Manhattan glittered below like a circuit board. 42 floors up, she could see the whole island, could trace the arteries of commerce and power that made the city breathe. She turned back to her team. Marcus wanted freedom from mediocrity. Let's give him freedom, the most expensive kind. After everyone left, Victoria sat alone in the dim conference room. She unlocked a private drawer in her desk using a fingerprint scanner. Inside, a manila envelope she hadn't opened in months. The ultrasound photo was still crisp. 12 weeks. The image was mostly gray and white static, but if you knew what to look for, you could see the tiny form. Her baby. Their baby. The family that could have been. She carried it to the fireplace built into the wall. Decorative, rarely used, but functional. She struck a match and held the flame to the corner of the photo. Watching it curl and blacken, she thought about the woman she'd been 8 months ago. Hopeful, believing that love could survive anything, willing to sacrifice her identity for the chance at belonging. That woman was gone now, burned away like paper in fire. You wanted me gone, Marcus. Consider it done. But you should have asked what I was before you threw me away. She dropped the last burning fragment into the fireplace and watched it turn to ash. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of calculated warfare. Monday morning, Victoria met with representatives from Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and J.P. Morgan. Dark pool transactions, invisible to public markets, allowed her to purchase an additional 8% of Silvercrest stock. Cost, $195 million. Her total stake, 39%. George Mitchell, Silvercrest's CEO, called Marcus at noon. Someone's buying our stock aggressively. Volume spike is 400%. You know anything about this? Marcus, confident and clueless, reassured him. Probably institutional investors betting on our Zenith deal. Relax, George. It's good news. Tuesday, Arthur's legal team flew to Wilmington, Delaware. A whistleblower, former accountant for Vanderpool Capital, met them in a parking garage with a USB drive. 300 pages of bank transfers, emails, shell company documentation. Proof that Richard Vanderpool had systematically embezzled $12 million from Ironworkers Pension Fund Local 401, then laundered it through a maze of offshore accounts. The money trail was pristine. Delaware LLC to Cayman accounts to Swiss banking to personal real estate in the Hamptons. Every step documented. Wednesday, Victoria personally called 4 major Silvercrest shareholders. Her pitch was simple, irresistible. 40% premium, cash deal, close in 24 hours. By midnight, she'd secured an additional 13%. Total stake, 52.1%. Majority control. Total cost, $680 million, well within her allocated budget of $1.2 billion. Linda's text came through at 12:47 a.m. We own Silvercrest. Hostile takeover complete. Victoria's response. Don't file the SEC paperwork until Friday at 6 a.m. I want Marcus to walk into that room with no idea what's coming. Wednesday night, Victoria couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the city that never dimmed, and opened a private file on her laptop. The folder was titled simply, Marcus, Timeline. 2 years ago. A photo of them in front of the Brooklyn Bridge. Marcus in a worn hoodie, Victoria in ripped jeans, both laughing. The caption she'd written, the day he said he loved me, I believed him 18 months ago. A scanned receipt for $2,400. Her note, third rent payment this year I covered for him. 1 year ago, bank transfer confirmation for $10,000. Her note, Marcus said Tesla stock tip, money never returned. 8 months ago, a hospital bill from Mount Sinai. Her note, miscarriage at 12 weeks. He never knew I was pregnant. He never knew I lost our child. He was in Las Vegas 6 months ago. Private investigators report with photos of Marcus and Amber Vanderpool entering the Plaza Hotel. Her note, affair confirmed, started in July. Protocol nightfall planning begins. Victoria closed the file. Her reflection in the window glass looked back at her. Older than 32, harder, but clear-eyed in a way she hadn't been in years. I wanted to believe love was enough. I wanted to believe he'd change when he succeeded. I was the fool. She touched the cold glass. But I'm done being foolish. Thursday brought the final preparations. Victoria rehearsed her presentation in front of a mirror. Mr. Harrington, you need to sit down. Too soft. Mr. Harrington, sit down. Better. Mr. Harrington, sit. Perfect. Command, not request. Sebastian watched from the doorway. Madam, you've eviscerated Fortune 500 CEOs in front of Senate committees. Why the practice? Because they were strangers. Victoria adjusted the collar of her white Dior suit. Marcus, I loved him once. I need to be flawless. No cracks in the armor. At 5 p.m., Linda burst into Victoria's office. We have a problem. Vanderpool Capital just purchased 6% of Silvercrest stock. They're trying to block us. Victoria didn't flinch. We have 52%. They have 6%. Mathematics doesn't negotiate, Linda. But it means Richard Vanderpool knows something's happening. Good. Victoria's smile was cold. I want him scared when he walks into that room tomorrow. That night, Victoria returned to her penthouse alone. Sebastian had offered to stay, to keep her company, but she declined. Some battles you had to fight in silence. She poured herself 2 fingers of whiskey, Macallan 25, Marcus's favorite that he'd never shared with her, and stood at the window. Tomorrow would change everything. Tomorrow would burn bridges, destroy reputations, reshape futures. Tomorrow, the quiet housewife would show the world who she really was. And Marcus, poor Marcus, would finally understand the difference between a passenger and a pilot. She raised her glass to the glittering city, to new beginnings, to honest endings, to the most expensive lesson you'll ever receive. The whiskey burned going down, but it was nothing compared to the fire she was about to unleash. Friday morning arrived cold and crystalline. Victoria woke at 5, not from an alarm, but from the electric current of anticipation running through her veins. She'd slept 3 hours, dreamless and efficient. Today required perfection, and perfection demanded sacrifice. The sky outside her penthouse windows was still dark, Manhattan's buildings outlined in pre-dawn gray. She made espresso in the Italian machine Marcus had never learned to use, drinking it black while reviewing the final documents Arthur had sent at 4:47 a.m. Everything was ready, every piece positioned, every exit blocked. At 6 o'clock, her phone chimed with Linda's confirmation. SEC filing complete. Zenith Global Holdings now officially owned 52.1% of Silvercrest Industries. Public record. Irreversible. The takeover was no longer a shadow operation. It was carved into federal documentation, time-stamped, permanent as stone. Victoria showered in water hot enough to redden her skin, washing away the last traces of the woman who'd sat quietly at the end of Marcus's table. The transformation took 90 minutes. Her stylist, Margot, arrived at 7 with a makeup artist named Sienna. Both had worked with Victoria for years. Both understood the assignment without needing explanation. Hair first. Margot pulled Victoria's hair back so tightly it made her scalp ache, weaving it into a high bun that sat severe and geometric at her crown. Not a strand out of place. The style was armor, not adornment. Sienna approached with brushes and palettes. The makeup was strategic warfare. Sharp, winged eyeliner that could cut glass. Contouring that made Victoria's cheekbones look carved from marble. Bold, red lipstick the color of arterial blood. This wasn't beauty, this was intimidation packaged in Chanel. The white Dior suit came last. Victoria stepped into it like a knight donning plate mail. The fabric was heavy, structured, unforgiving. $8,500 of pure authority. The jacket sat on her shoulders with military precision. The pants broke perfectly over her Louboutin heels. Sebastian arrived with the final pieces. The Cartier diamond sun brooch, Zenith's logo rendered in platinum and stones, pinned to her lapel. The Patek Philippe Nautilus in white gold circled her wrist. $180,000 of Swiss engineering that Marcus had never known she owned. She studied herself in the full-length mirror. The woman looking back bore no resemblance to the housewife in the H&M dress. This woman commanded. This woman conquered. This woman had built an empire, while men like Marcus were still learning to spell ambition. Sebastian stood behind her, barely visible in the reflection. His face showed nothing, but she'd worked with him long enough to read the microscopic tells. The slight tightness around his eyes meant concern. Second thoughts, Madam Chairman? None. Victoria turned from the mirror. But Marcus is about to have several thousand of them. The drive to Zenith headquarters took 12 minutes. The Bentley glided through Manhattan's morning traffic with predatory grace. Sebastian at the wheel, Victoria in the back reviewing her notes one final time. Not that she needed them. Every word, every gesture, every devastating reveal had been rehearsed until it lived in her muscle memory. They arrived at Zenith Tower at 7:15. The building rose 60 stories above Park Avenue, all glass and steel and brutal modern beauty. Victoria had designed it herself, working with architects for 3 years to create something that looked like a blade cutting into the sky. The lobby alone could swallow a cathedral. At this hour, the building was nearly empty. Night security nodded as she passed, calling her by name. "Morning, Ms. Blake." She returned the greeting with a slight smile. These were her people. This was her kingdom. The private elevator to the 42nd floor required a keycard and fingerprint scan. Victoria placed her thumb on the reader and felt the small vibration as it verified her identity. The doors opened directly into the executive suite. Arthur was already there, looking like he hadn't slept. Knowing Arthur, he probably hadn't. He held a steaming cup of coffee in one hand and a tablet in the other, his silver hair slightly disheveled, the only sign of the 72-hour sprint they just completed. Victoria, everything's set. Conference room is ready, cameras are hidden, recording equipment tested. Legal documents are printed and organized. The board members you requested are standing by. Linda appeared from the conference room, dressed in a sharp navy suit that screamed competence. Behind her, Claire Morrison, the board member who'd been with Zenith since its founding, moved with the careful dignity of a woman who'd seen corporate warfare and knew its cost. Claire, thank you for coming. The older woman's face was kind but serious. Are you absolutely certain, Victoria? This will be public. Bloomberg already has reporters downstairs asking about unusual stock activity. The Wall Street Journal called me at 6 this morning. Victoria set down her briefcase. Marcus humiliated me privately for 2 years. He called me mediocre, invisible, worthless. Told me to stick to grocery lists while he built his future. Turnabout deserves an audience. Claire studied her for a long moment. And after? When the cameras flash and the articles run? When everyone knows you're the architect? I've hidden in shadows for 7 years. Maybe it's time to step into the light. Victoria walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. From here, she could see Central Park to the north, the Statue of Liberty to the south. Her city, her empire. Besides, some truths are too big to whisper. The conference room was a masterpiece of calculated intimidation. A 40-foot table of polished walnut dominated the space, surrounded by leather chairs that cost more than most people's cars. The southern wall was entirely glass, offering a view that reminded visitors exactly how high they'd climbed and how far they could fall. The northern wall mirrored it, framing Central Park in a way that made the city look like a possession, something that could be owned. Sebastian had positioned 8 cameras throughout the room, invisible unless you knew where to look. Embedded in light fixtures, tucked into decorative molding, hidden behind the spines of legal books that lined one wall. Everything would be recorded. Every word, every expression, every moment of Marcus's world crumbling. Victoria walked to the head of the table and placed her hands on the leather chair. This seat, this position, this was where she belonged. Not at the far end of someone else's table, enduring insults over dessert she'd baked. Here, in command. She practiced one more time, speaking to the empty room. Mr. Harrington, sit. Perfect. Command without volume. Authority that didn't need to be raised. At 8:30, the final pieces arrived. Rebecca and David, the analysts who'd worked the Vanderpool investigation, wheeled in a cart loaded with files. Evidence organized by category. Financial crimes, fabricated credentials, forged signatures, wire fraud. Everything documented, everything verified, everything ready to destroy. Arthur approached with a folder marked "Confidential" in red letters. The FBI confirmation on Richard Vanderpool. Agent Morrison says the arrest warrant will be executed Monday morning, 9 a.m. They wanted to thank us for the evidence. Apparently their investigation had stalled until our forensic team provided the paper trail. Victoria accepted the folder. Inside, photocopies of bank statements, emails, wire transfers. Richard Vanderpool's greed rendered in black and white, irrefutable as mathematics. She felt nothing looking at it. No satisfaction, no anger. Just the cold recognition of a problem being solved. And Amber's Harvard records? Rebecca handed over a notarized letter on Harvard Law School letterhead. The registrar's office had been thorough. No record of Amber Claire Vanderpool enrolling in any program, ever. The law degree she'd built her identity around was smoke, nothing more. Perfect. File everything in order of reveal. I want the presentation to flow like a prosecution. By 9 o'clock, everyone was in position. Victoria stood at the windows, back to the room, watching the city wake up. Below, people flooded the streets, chasing their own ambitions, building their own futures. How many of them knew that the woman 42 floors above them had started with nothing? Foster care in Boston. No family, no connections. Just a brain that worked like a calculator and a hunger that couldn't be satisfied. She'd built Zenith from scratch at 25, turning a $10,000 loan into billions through private equity deals that bordered on prescient. Real estate investments that seemed reckless until they paid off at 10 times value. Tech startups that everyone dismissed until they revolutionized industries. And she'd done it all while Marcus was still figuring out how to format a PowerPoint. Her phone vibrated. Sebastian's text. They've arrived. 4 people. Harrington, Vanderpool female, Vanderpool male, Mitchell, lobby now. Victoria's heart rate didn't change. Her breathing stayed steady. This was just another negotiation, another boardroom, another set of opponents who'd underestimated her. She'd done this 100 times. Except this time, one of the opponents was the man she'd loved. The man who'd promised her forever and delivered 2 years. She pushed the thought away. Sentiment was a luxury she couldn't afford today. The elevator descended to the lobby. Through the building's security cameras, displayed on a monitor in the conference room, Victoria watched Marcus's arrival. He looked confident. That was her first observation. He walked into Zenith's cathedral of a lobby like he owned it, amber on his arm in a red Valentino dress that screamed money and ambition. Richard Vanderpool followed, silver-haired and cold-eyed, moving with the assurance of a man who'd spent 40 years in boardrooms. George Mitchell brought up the rear, sweating despite the aggressive air conditioning. The receptionist, Hannah, was one of Victoria's favorite hires. 28, sharp as a scalpel, with a gift for reading people and a complete inability to be intimidated. She didn't look up from her computer as Marcus approached. Names, please. Marcus leaned on the marble counter, flashing the smile that probably worked on junior analysts. Marcus, Harrington, and party. We're here for the architect. 10 o'clock meeting. Hannah's expression didn't change. ID badges, please. They produced their driver's licenses. Hannah scanned them with deliberate slowness, printed visitor stickers, and gestured to a set of plastic chairs far from the elevators. Wait in Area B. Marcus's confidence flickered. Area B? We're merger partners, not vendors, can't we? Hannah finally looked at him, her face a masterpiece of professional neutrality. Area B, or you can leave. Victoria, watching on the monitor, felt a small smile tug at her lips. Hannah deserved a raise. Area B was deliberately uncomfortable. Hard plastic chairs, positioned near the restrooms, with a view of nothing but a concrete wall. Marcus sat with visible annoyance, checking his Rolex every 30 seconds. Amber fidgeted with her Cartier bracelet. Richard scanned the room like he was calculating its value. George looked like he might vomit. This is ridiculous, Marcus's voice carried through the monitor's speakers. When I close this deal, I'm telling the architect about this treatment. George wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. Marcus, maybe we should review the presentation one more time. It's perfect. Stop worrying. Richard checked his watch. Where's your wife? I thought she demanded to be here. Marcus waved dismissively. Victoria? She probably chickened out, or she's waiting in some coffee shop nearby, too intimidated to actually come up. At exactly 10 o'clock, Hannah's phone rang. She listened, nodded, and looked toward Area B. Mr. Harrington, the architect will see you now. Executive elevator on the left. Floor 42. Marcus stood, straightening his Hugo Boss suit. Finally, some respect. The 4 of them crowded into the elevator, surrounded by mirrors that multiplied their reflections into infinity. Victoria watched their faces on the security feed. Marcus looked smug. Amber looked nervous, chewing her lower lip. Richard looked calculating. George looked doomed. As the elevator climbed, Amber broke the silence. Marcus, where is Victoria? Shouldn't she be here to sign the papers? She'll show up eventually. We'll sign the divorce in 5 minutes. She gets her money, then we celebrate the Zenith deal. Marcus adjusted his tie in the mirror. Probably too embarrassed to ride up with us. Richard's voice was sharp. Focus, Marcus. Let me handle the architect. This is a $200 million contract. Don't muddy it with personal drama. The elevator doors opened on 42. Sebastian stood waiting, immaculate in his charcoal suit, American flag pin on his lapel. His face revealed nothing, but Victoria knew him well enough to see the anticipation in his eyes. "Mr. Harrington, this way, please." Marcus tried for casual authority. "You are?" "Sebastian Cross, Chief of Staff to the Chairman. Follow me." They walked down the marble corridor, passing offices where analysts worked at Bloomberg terminals, building empires one trade at a time. The walls displayed framed magazine covers, Forbes featuring a silhouette with the headline, "The Architect, the Mystery $40 billion Woman." Fortune with Zenith Global, how one CEO built an empire in silence. The Wall Street Journal's The Invisible Hand, V. Blake's investment strategy. Marcus glanced at the covers. "The Architect is a woman? Huh, probably some old battle axe." Sebastian didn't respond. He led them to the mahogany double doors marked Executive Conference Room, Authorized Personnel Only. He opened both doors wide. Sunlight flooded the corridor, momentarily blinding the visitors. When their eyes adjusted, they saw the conference room in all its intimidating glory. The massive table, the commanding views, and at the head of the table, silhouetted against the morning light, a woman in white. Her back was turned. She stood motionless, looking north toward Central Park, her posture speaking volumes about power and patience. Marcus's voice carried irritation and confusion. "Excuse me, we have a meeting with the architect, is she?" The woman turned. The silence that followed was absolute. 10 seconds of pure, uncomprehending shock. Victoria let them stare, let them process, let their brains misfire trying to reconcile the meek housewife with the CEO who commanded this fortress of glass and steel. Marcus blinked rapidly, his mouth opening and closing like a fish drowning in air. Amber's lipstick-perfect mouth formed a perfect O. Richard's face drained of color so fast it looked medically concerning. George swayed on his feet. Marcus found his voice first, though it came out strangled. "Tori? What are you doing here? Did they hire you to—" "I don't know, cater? You need to leave. We have a very important—" Victoria's voice cut through his babbling. Not the soft, apologetic tone she'd used at his table. This was different, lower, authoritative, the voice that made billion-dollar decisions. "Sit down, Marcus." He laughed, a nervous sound that echoed wrong in the large room. "No, seriously, Tori, this isn't funny. You're embarrassing yourself. The architect is coming and—" "Sit down." Louder now. Command, not request. Marcus looked at Sebastian as if expecting him to explain the joke. Is this some kind of—" Sebastian moved between them, his presence suddenly enormous despite his average height. "Mr. Harrington, you are addressing Victoria Elaine Blake, founder and chairman of Zenith Global Holdings. You will show respect or you will be escorted from this building. Choose quickly." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. His knees buckled, forcing him to grab the nearest chair for support. "Blake, but your name is Harrington. You're my wife. You're—" Victoria removed her white suit jacket, draping it carefully over the back of her chair. The gesture was deliberate, revealing the diamond sun brooch on her silk blouse, the watch on her wrist that cost more than Marcus made in a year. "Blake is my maiden name, the name I've used for business for 7 years, the name on every Zenith document, every contract, every deal." She paused, letting it sink in. "You married Victoria Harrington. You've been trying to partner with V. Blake. Same person, Marcus. You just never bothered to ask." Amber's voice came out shrill, disbelieving, desperate. "This is insane. Victoria, you're a housewife. You bake lemon tarts. You wear H&M. Victoria turned to her, and the smile that crossed her face was colder than anything Marcus had ever seen. "I also manage $38 billion in assets across private equity, real estate, and venture capital in 17 sectors across 9 states. But yes, I do bake excellent lemon tarts. I'm talented at multitasking. George Mitchell found his voice, though it shook badly. Ms. Blake, Victoria, I had absolutely no idea. Marcus never mentioned his wife was. We had no knowledge. That Marcus was married to the CEO whose approval he desperately needed? No, George, I imagine he omitted that detail. Victoria walked slowly around the table, each step of her heels clicking like a countdown. Probably because he didn't know. He never asked what I did before we met, never questioned why I had my own penthouse, never wondered about the calls I took in private. He saw what he wanted to see, a convenient wife who wouldn't threaten his fragile ego. Richard Vanderpool tried to assert control, his boardroom instincts kicking in despite the shock. Miss Blake, this is highly irregular. Mixing personal matters with business. Arthur Pendleton materialized from the side of the room where he'd been standing, so still they'd missed him entirely. He slid a thick folder across the table. It stopped directly in front of Richard, the red confidential stamp facing up like an accusation. Mr. Vanderpool, inside you'll find evidence of your embezzlement of $12 million from the Iron Workers Pension Fund, Local 401, in 2019. The money was laundered through a Delaware LLC, then moved to offshore accounts, then converted to personal real estate holdings in the Hamptons. We have bank statements, wire transfers, emails, and testimony from your former accountant. Arthur's voice was clinical, surgical. The FBI has a warrant. Monday morning, 9 a.m., they're coming to your office. I'd recommend getting your affairs in order. Richard's hand trembled as he opened the folder. His face went from pale to gray as he scanned the first page, recognizing his own signature, his own crimes rendered irrefutable. This is slander. I will sue you for defamation. You'll be in federal prison. Victoria's voice was ice over steel. 23 counts of wire fraud. The evidence is airtight, Richard. We had forensic accountants trace every dollar. You should have been more careful. Richard sat heavily, the fight draining out of him like blood from a wound. Victoria turned to Amber. For a moment, something almost like pity crossed her face. Almost. Ms. Vanderpool, Harvard Law School, class of 2018. Is that correct? Amber's face went white. She knew what was coming. Yes. Victoria pulled a notarized letter from the stack of documents on the table. Strange. I contacted Harvard's registrar office yesterday. They have no record of an Amber Claire Vanderpool enrolling in any program. Not in 2018. Not ever. She held up the letter so everyone could see the Harvard seal. You enrolled in 2016. You dropped out in 2017 after failing torts in civil procedure. You never graduated, Amber. The law degree you built your entire identity around is a fabrication. Amber's carefully constructed composure shattered. Tears welled in her eyes, ruining Sienna's artful makeup. I can explain. I was going to finish. You lied on your LinkedIn, lied on your resume, lied to Marcus. You're a fraud, Amber. Victoria's voice softened slightly, not with kindness, but with the weary recognition of damage calling to damage. Just like your father. Amber turned to Marcus, mascara beginning to run. Marcus, I'm sorry. I was going to tell you. But Marcus wasn't listening. He'd stood up, both hands on the table, leaning forward with something approaching mania in his eyes. His voice rose to a near shout, desperation cracking through every syllable. Okay, Tori, Victoria, baby, this is actually amazing. My wife is a billionaire. This means the Zenith deal is done, right? We're family. We can... He reached across the table, trying to grab her hand. Victoria stepped back smoothly, easily, like avoiding a beggar on the street. She held up the divorce papers he'd shoved at her 5 days ago. We were family, Marcus. Past tense. You divorced me 5 days ago. At your mother's dinner table, remember? Sign and get out of my house. Marcus's voice cracked, his professional facade disintegrating into raw panic. That was, that was a test. I was testing your loyalty. Baby, please, let's tear up the papers. We can start over. I didn't mean... Victoria turned to Arthur without looking at Marcus. File these immediately. The settlement stands as written. Marcus receives $50,000 in the Queen's studio apartment. I retain all other assets. All other assets? Marcus's brain was still trying to process, still trying to find solid ground in quicksand. What other assets? You don't have... Victoria walked to her laptop at the head of the table. She opened it with deliberate slowness, typed in her password, pulled up a file. Then she spun the screen to face them. Silvercrest Industries. Shareholder breakdown. Updated 6 a.m. today. The numbers glowed on the screen like a verdict. Zenith Global Holdings, LLC, 52.1%. Various smaller shareholders, 41.9%. Vanderpool Capital, 6.0%. The silence was the sound of a world ending. Victoria's voice was calm, almost gentle, which somehow made it more devastating. I bought your company, Marcus. Hostile takeover. Filed with the SEC at 6 o'clock this morning. It's public record now. I am the majority owner of Silvercrest Industries. George Mitchell's face went through several colors before settling on a sickly green. You own my company? Correct. Victoria sat down in her chair, the position of power, and steepled her fingers. And my first action as majority shareholder is restructuring. Effective immediately. Marcus was shaking his head, physically unable to accept the information. No, you can't. I built the sales division, my commission alone. Let's review your performance, Marcus. Victoria pulled up another file. 3 proposals submitted to Zenith Global, all rejected. Do you know why? His mouth worked silently. Proposal 2, entire market analysis copied verbatim from a McKinsey quarterly report from Q2. Proposal 3, financial projections stolen from a Goldman Sachs pitch deck meant for a completely different client. I verified both. That's corporate fraud, Marcus. Plagiarism at the executive level. George tried desperately to salvage something. Ms. Blake, I had no knowledge of Marcus's methodology. Silvercrest maintains the highest ethical... Victoria's gaze shifted to him, and he fell silent. George, you've been CEO for 8 years. In that time, revenue has declined 23%. R&D spending has dropped to 0. You've coasted on legacy relationships while your competitors innovate around you. The board should have fired you 3 years ago, but they were too comfortable to act. She opened the folder in front of her. As majority shareholder, my first executive action is immediate restructuring. George Mitchell, you are terminated for gross negligence and failure to maintain fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. Severance package, 0, per the morality clause in your employment contract. Security will escort you out after this meeting concludes. George seemed to collapse inward. My pension, intact. I'm not needlessly cruel, but your tenure at Silvercrest is finished. Then Victoria turned the full force of her attention to Marcus. He actually flinched. Marcus Reed Harrington. His whisper was barely audible. Tori, please. You are terminated, effective immediately, for cause. She counted on her fingers. Incompetence, plagiarism, corporate fraud, and attempting to leverage a personal relationship that no longer exists to secure contracts you were unqualified to negotiate. Marcus's voice broke completely. You can't. I built the sales division. My commission alone was going to be... Your commission was based on deals you stole credit for. Our IT department flagged your work 6 months ago. You haven't personally closed a single original contract in over a year. You've been riding on your team's work and presenting it as your own. Victoria's voice was clinical now, a surgeon explaining a necessary amputation. Your severance package, 0. Stock options, voided per termination clause. Company car, laptop and phone, repossessed as of this moment. Marcus staggered, grabbing the table for support. I have nothing. No job, no money, no. Victoria, please, I'll do anything. You have $50,000. From our divorce settlement. Victoria glanced at Amber, whose makeup was now completely ruined, black rivers of mascara cutting through foundation. And you have Miss Vanderpool, though I imagine that relationship has a limited shelf life given recent revelations. Amber turned on Marcus like a wounded animal. You told me the Zenith deal was guaranteed. You said your wife was nobody. Marcus spun toward her. You told me your father had connections. You said Harvard Law. I never said I could guarantee anything. You used me for my father's money. I have debts. I thought. They were both standing now, voices rising, years of careful social polish burning away in the heat of mutual betrayal. Marcus's voice cracked with rage and desperation. You gold-digging liar! Amber's hand moved before anyone could react. The slap echoed through the conference room like a gunshot. Marcus's head snapped to the side, a red handprint blooming on his cheek. You're the liar! You said you loved me! Victoria pressed the intercom button on the table. Security, escort the former employees of Silvercrest Industries from the building. Immediately. The doors opened. 4 security guards entered, professional and efficient in their Navy uniforms. They'd done this before. Corporate headquarters saw their share of emotional terminations. Marcus tried to run to Victoria. Sebastian materialized in his path, not touching him, but creating an impassable barrier through presence alone. Tori, please! Marcus's voice rose to a shout that echoed off the glass walls. I love you. I'm sorry. Amber meant nothing. I was confused. The pressure. Please, baby, I'll change. I'll be better. The guards took his arms gently but firmly. Amber was crying openly now, all pretense of sophistication dissolved. Daddy, do something! Richard's voice was hollow, defeated. I can't, sweetheart. The FBI is coming Monday. I can't help anyone. As the guards pulled them toward the door, Marcus fought against their grip. Not physically, he wasn't stupid enough for that, but verbally, desperately, like a drowning man grasping for driftwood. Victoria, you can't leave me with nothing. I'll be homeless. I can't live on. What am I supposed to do? Victoria turned her chair toward the window, away from him, away from the wreckage of what they'd been. She looked out at Central Park, at the city she'd conquered while he was learning to steal credit from his subordinates. She didn't respond, just listened as his voice faded down the hallway, growing more desperate, more pathetic. Please, Tori, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. The door closed. The soundproofing cut off his voice mid-scream. Silence rushed back into the room like water filling a vacuum. Arthur cleared his throat gently. Victoria, are you all right? Victoria sat very still. For the first time all morning, her control wavered. Her hands, resting on the arms of her chair, trembled slightly. When she spoke, her voice was quieter, and something human crept back into it. I loved him, Arthur. 2 years ago, I really did love him. She allowed herself one tear, a single drop that traced down her cheek, cutting through Sienna's perfect makeup. Then she wiped it away, and her voice firmed again, the chairman returning. But he didn't love me. He loved what he thought I could never be. And I'm done mourning something that never actually existed. Claire Morrison, who'd witnessed the entire scene from her position along the wall, crossed to Victoria and placed a hand on her shoulder. The gesture was maternal, grounding. He didn't deserve you, dear, and now the world knows exactly what he lost. Sebastian appeared at Victoria's elbow with a glass of water. She drank it gratefully, feeling her pulse slow back to normal, feeling control return like a familiar coat. Madam Chairman, Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal are in the lobby. They want a statement about the Silvercrest acquisition, and about you. Victoria stood, reaching for her white jacket. She put it back on, each button a return to armor. Give me 5 minutes to compose myself, then I'll go down. And Marcus's office? Sebastian's practical mind was already 3 steps ahead. He still has keys, security codes. Call building management. Change every lock, every code, every access point related to Silvercrest immediately. I don't want him stealing files on his way out. Victoria checked her reflection in the dark window glass. The tear track was gone. The CEO stared back at her, flawless and untouchable. And Sebastian, call our head of HR. I want a full audit of Silvercrest sales division by Monday. If Marcus was plagiarizing, I want to know who else knew and who else might be compromised. Already in motion, ma'am. Of course it was. Sebastian was 3 moves ahead, always. Victoria took the elevator down to the lobby alone. She needed these 60 seconds of solitude, this brief pause between the private destruction and the public revelation. The elevator descended through the building she designed, past the floors where her employees worked, past the machinery of empire. The doors opened on the lobby. The marble cathedral was packed. Not just Bloomberg and the Journal. Apparently word had spread fast. She counted reporters from Forbes, Fortune, CNBC, the Financial Times. Cameras, microphones, recorders, a feeding frenzy of journalists who'd been chasing the mystery of the architect for years. Hannah had corralled them behind velvet ropes, creating a makeshift press area. Smart woman, definitely getting that raise. Victoria stepped out of the elevator. The crowd surged forward against the ropes. Questions exploded from every direction, overlapping into noise. Miss Blake, is it true you're the architect? Can you confirm the Silvercrest takeover? What's your relationship to Marcus Harrington? How long have you been hiding your identity? Victoria raised one hand. The crowd fell silent. That was power, the ability to command attention without speaking. She walked to the center of the lobby, letting them see her fully. The white suit, the diamond brooch, the watch. Everything that Marcus had never known, she possessed. A Bloomberg reporter, young and sharp-eyed, spoke first. Ms. Blake, can you confirm you're the founder and CEO known as the architect? Yes. No hesitation, no hedging. I founded Zenith Global Holdings 7 years ago at age 25. I've remained private to focus on building value rather than celebrity. Today that changes. A Wall Street Journal veteran pushed forward. Can you confirm Zenith now owns a majority stake in Silvercrest Industries? Zenith Global Holdings acquired 52.1% of Silvercrest Industries through legal purchases over the past 8 weeks. The acquisition was filed with the SEC at 6 a.m. this morning. It's public record. Forbes. Sources say your ex-husband worked at Silvercrest. Did you know? Victoria met the reporter's eyes. I became aware of Marcus Harrington's employment at Silvercrest during standard due diligence. His termination this morning was based solely on performance metrics and documented ethical violations. Personal history did not factor into business decisions. That was a lie, and everyone in the room knew it. But it was the right lie, the legal lie, the one that would protect her from lawsuits while still destroying him in the court of public opinion. The young Bloomberg reporter tried again. Will you comment on your divorce? My personal life is private, but I will say this. Victoria paused, letting the cameras focus, letting the recorders catch every word. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Thank you. She turned and walked back to the elevator, Sebastian materializing to run interference. The questions exploded behind her, but she didn't look back. She'd said everything that needed saying. The elevator doors closed on the chaos. Victoria leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was draining away, leaving something hollow in its wake. You did well, Madam Chairman. Sebastian kept his eyes forward, giving her privacy in her moment of vulnerability. I destroyed him. He destroyed himself. You merely revealed it. The elevator climbed. Victoria watched the floor numbers tick higher. 42 felt very far away. When the doors opened, Arthur was waiting with her phone. It's already trending. The architect revealed. Secret billionaire CEO. The photos of you in the lobby are going viral. And Victoria? He showed her his tablet. The stock price of Silvercrest jumped 18% in the last 20 minutes. Investors are celebrating the leadership change. Victoria took her phone, scrolled through the headlines, the tweets, the instant analysis. Her face stared back from a dozen screens. No more shadows, no more mystery. The architect had a name, a face, a story. And somewhere in that building, in his office that would be locked to him by the end of the hour, Marcus was learning what it meant to lose everything. She wondered if he was crying, then decided she didn't care. Linda appeared with a tablet full of numbers, reports, projections. Victoria, we need to discuss next steps for Silvercrest. The restructuring plan, new leadership appointments, PR strategy. Tomorrow. Victoria's voice was firm, but tired. I have one more thing to handle today. The estate? Arthur's expression showed he'd already anticipated this. Diane doesn't know yet, and when Marcus arrives home in disgrace, I want to be there with the consequences. The Bentley arrived at the Harrington estate at 3:15 p.m. The October sun sat lower in the sky now, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn where Victoria had once imagined children playing. Marcus's children. The family that would never exist. Diane was visible through the bay window, pacing the length of her Persian rugged parlor with a phone pressed to her ear, probably trying to reach Marcus. Good luck with that. His company phone had been deactivated at 10:47 a.m., personal cell likely dying under the weight of panic calls from colleagues who'd already seen the headlines. Sebastian killed the engine but made no move to open Victoria's door. Are you certain about this timing, Madam Chairman? You could wait until Monday, handle it through lawyers. She needs to hear it from me. Victoria checked her appearance in the compact mirror. The makeup had held up remarkably well despite the emotional earthquake of the morning. Besides, when Marcus arrives home in whatever Uber he could afford, I want the ground already scorched. No shelter, no comfort, just consequences. The front door of the estate flew open before Victoria reached the steps. Diane stood in the entrance, backlit by the chandelier, and for a moment she looked every one of her 62 years. The platinum hair seemed thinner. The designer clothes hung differently, as if she'd lost weight from stress she didn't know she was carrying. Then recognition hit, and rage transformed her face into something ugly. You have nerve coming back here. Diane descended the stone steps, finger pointed like a weapon. And in a rented car, no less. Did you bring your trash bags? I told Maria to leave them by the service entrance where they belong. Victoria removed her sunglasses slowly. Let Diane see her eyes. Let her see the woman who just dismantled her son's life with the efficiency of a surgeon removing a tumor. I'm not here for my belongings, Diane. I'm here to inform you that, as of today, I own this house. The color drained from Diane's face so fast it looked like time-lapse photography. You delusional girl. The divorce papers are signed. You get the Queen's apartment and your pittance. This estate belongs to the Harrington Family Trust. It has been in my family since 1952. You have no claim here. Victoria gestured to Sebastian, who approached carrying a leather portfolio. Show her. He extracted a document, holding it so Diane could see the seal of the New York State Supreme Court and the logo of a private holding company, Zenith Distressed Assets, LLC. Diane snatched the paper, her hands shaking badly enough to make the pages rattle. What is this? Notice of immediate repossession and foreclosure. Victoria's voice was professional, clinical, devoid of personal venom. You see, Diane, your son has expensive tastes. Private poker games in Atlantic City, high-stakes tables where he was catastrophically bad at math. Last year, Marcus racked up $3.2 million in debt. Diane was shaking her head, but her eyes were locked on the document, drinking in the terrible truth printed in legal font. To cover those debts, he took out a secondary mortgage on this estate, $3.8 million from Bank of America. He leveraged the deed. That's impossible. Diane's voice was barely a whisper. The deed is in my name. He couldn't mortgage it without my signature. Victoria nodded to Sebastian, who flipped to page 3 of the document. There at the bottom, a signature. Catherine Diane Harrington. He forged it. Victoria let the words land like stones in still water. Bank fraud. The handwriting analysis is 94% certain. Your signature is fake, Diane. Marcus committed federal fraud using your identity. Diane's legs gave out. She sat heavily on the stone steps, the papers fluttering from her hands. No, Ethan wouldn't. He's my son. He gambled away your house and thought the Zenith deal would save him. The $5 million commission would have been enough to pay off the mortgage before you ever found out. It was all planned. Victoria crouched down so she was eye level with the older woman. But the Zenith deal was never going to happen, Diane, because I rejected his proposals, all 3 of them. I've been rejecting Marcus for months. Understanding dawned slowly, then all at once. Diane's eyes widened as she looked at Victoria, really looked for the first time. The white suit, the diamond brooch, the watch that cost 6 figures, the Bentley idling in the driveway. You. The word came out strangled. You're Victoria Elaine Blake, founder and chairman of Zenith Global Holdings, the company worth $38 billion that your son was desperately trying to partner with. Victoria stood, brushing invisible dust from her pants. I'm the woman you called the help for 2 years. The one you said was dragging Marcus down, the mediocrity he needed to escape. Diane's face cycled through emotions too fast to name. Shock, disbelief, horror, rage, then finally, something that looked like despair. The bank was going to seize this house next Tuesday, but I didn't want strangers living in my ex-husband's childhood home, so I bought the debt this morning. I own the mortgage note, Diane, and since payments are 6 months overdue, I'm exercising my legal right to immediate foreclosure. Victoria checked the Patek Philippe on her wrist. You have 2 hours to vacate the premises. My team will inventory the fixtures to ensure nothing of significant value is removed. You can take personal belongings, clothing, photographs, documents. Everything else stays. You can't do this. But Diane's voice held no conviction. She knew exactly how powerless she was. I am a pillar of this community. You are nobody. A waitress Marcus picked up in a coffee shop. I am the chairwoman of a $40 billion empire. Victoria's voice didn't rise, but it cut like a blade. And you are trespassing on property I own. Would you like me to call the sheriff, or will you pack with dignity? Diane stared up at her, and something in the older woman's face crumbled. All the years of careful social positioning, all the desperate scrambling to rebuild the family name after her husband's bankruptcy and suicide, all the vicious protection of Marcus as her only hope for redemption, it all collapsed into ash. Why? The question came out broken. Why are you doing this? Victoria knelt again, close enough that Diane could see her own reflection in Victoria's eyes. Do you remember my birthday last year? You told me not to eat the cake because it was for guests only. I cried in the bathroom for 20 minutes. Diane blinked, clearly not remembering, which made it worse. Do you remember when my father died? I got the call during your dinner party. I asked to step out to take it. You said, "Don't ruin the evening with your drama." I watched my phone ring and ring until it stopped. I missed saying goodbye to the only parent I ever knew because you couldn't tolerate 5 minutes of inconvenience. Victoria stood. You didn't just tolerate cruelty, Diane. You weaponized it. You taught Marcus that some people matter and some people don't. That power gives you the right to diminish others. She turned toward the Bentley. Today you learned what it feels like to be on the other side of that equation. Consider it an education. The sound of an engine made them both turn. An Uber, a regular Uber, not even an Uber Black, pulled into the circular driveway. The driver looked confused by the obvious wealth of the estate, probably wondering why his passenger couldn't afford better. The rear door opened and Marcus stumbled out. His Hugo Boss suit was rumpled, the tie missing entirely. His face was blotchy and red, eyes swollen from crying. He looked like a man who'd aged 10 years in 6 hours. He saw Victoria and froze mid-step. Then his mother on the steps, papers scattered around her. Then Sebastian standing like a sentinel beside the Bentley. "Mom?" His voice cracked on the single syllable. "Mom, what's happening?" Diane struggled to her feet, grabbed Marcus by his lapels, and shook him with surprising violence. "Is it true? Did you mortgage my house? Did you forge my signature?" Marcus's silence was answer enough. Diane slapped him. Not the theatrical slap Amber had delivered in the boardroom. This was the slap of a mother whose last hope had just revealed himself to be worthless. The sound echoed across the lawn. "You idiot! You foolish, arrogant boy! You destroyed us!" Marcus's knees buckled. He collapsed onto the gravel driveway, expensive Italian wool grinding into the small stones. "I didn't know, Mom. I swear I didn't know it was her. If I'd known Tori was the CEO, I never would have." Victoria's voice cut through his babbling like a scalpel. "You never would have what, Marcus? Never would have treated me like garbage? Never would have cheated? Never would have divorced me?" She walked toward him slowly, each step deliberate. "That's the problem. You only treat people with respect when you think they have power. You didn't love me when I was Victoria the housewife. You only want me now because I'm Victoria the billionaire." She stopped a few feet from where he knelt, close enough to see the desperation in his eyes, but far enough to remain untouchable. "I can change." Marcus reached toward her with shaking hands. "Tori, please. I'm your husband. We have history. You can't just leave me with nothing. I have no job, no money. Amber took the car keys and left me at the office. I had to hotwire my own car just to get home. And where is that car now?" Marcus's face went even paler. The repo men came while I was still in the parking garage. They said it was company property that you..." He stopped, understanding clicking into place with sickening clarity. "You took my car. Silvercrest owns that Aston Martin. It was purchased with company funds. Since I own Silvercrest, I own the car. It's being auctioned Monday. Proceeds will go to a women's shelter for domestic abuse survivors." Victoria glanced at Sebastian. "Change the locks on the estate and have Mr. Harrington's vehicle towed if it's still here." Marcus scrambled backward on the gravel. "No, that's my car. It's all I have left." "You have your mother." Victoria gestured to Diane, who was staring at them both with the hollow eyes of someone watching a building collapse. "And you have your freedom. You wanted to be free of me, remember? Out with the old, in with the gold." A black SUV pulled up behind the Uber. 3 people emerged, a locksmith, 2 members of Victoria's security team. They moved with practiced efficiency toward the front door. Diane's voice came out small, defeated. "Victoria, please. The house. Where will we go? It's getting dark." Victoria paused with one hand on the Bentley's door. She looked back at the woman who'd made her life hell for 2 years, the woman who'd called her worthless and mediocre and invisible. For a moment, she considered walking away, letting them figure it out. They'd have done the same to her without a second thought. But she wasn't them. That was the point. There's a Motel 6 on Route 95. Weekly rates start at $300. Victoria opened her purse and pulled out a checkbook, actual paper, the kind people rarely used anymore. She wrote quickly, tore off the check, and walked back to Diane. $250,000, enough for a down payment on a modest condo, enough to start over. Diane took the check with trembling fingers, staring at it like she couldn't quite believe it was real. "Why?" "Because I'm not you. I don't kick people when they're down. Victoria's voice was firm, final. But this is the only kindness you'll receive from me. Take it or don't. Your choice. Marcus crawled forward on his knees, gravel embedding in his skin. What about me? Tori, I have nothing. No job, no car, no home. Victoria looked down at him. This man she'd once loved enough to give up her identity for. This man who'd promised her forever and delivered 2 years of condescension. This man who'd never once asked who she really was because he'd never cared enough to wonder. You have your freedom, Marcus. You wanted to be unburdened by mediocrity. Congratulations. You're free. She turned back to the Bentley. I hear the coffee shop where we met is hiring. Barista position. $15 an hour. You should apply. The owner is nice. She gave me my start when I was building Zenith and eating ramen for dinner. I can't live on 15 an hour. Victoria paused, hand on the car door. Then you'll learn to budget. Like I did. Like millions of Americans do every day. Consider it character building. She started to get in, then stopped. One more thing needed saying. Oh, the Aston Martin you love so much? The auction proceeds are going to the Coalition Against Domestic Violence. They do good work helping people escape situations where they're made to feel worthless. She met his eyes. And this estate? I'm not keeping it. The house will be demolished next month. The land will become a public park. Community garden plots for families who can't afford their own land. I'm calling it Second Chances Garden. Marcus's voice rose to a shout. You're destroying my childhood home. No, I'm creating something beautiful where something toxic used to be. There's a difference. Victoria slid into the Bentley's leather interior. Sebastian closed the door with a solid thunk that sounded like a coffin closing. Through the tinted window, she watched Marcus collapse against his mother, both of them kneeling in the driveway of the house they no longer owned. The Bentley pulled away smoothly, eating the distance between the estate and the main road with quiet power. Victoria didn't look back. Looking back was for people who had regrets. She had none. The drive back to Manhattan took 40 minutes in Friday afternoon traffic. Victoria spent it on her phone, fielding calls and messages that had accumulated during the confrontation. Her inbox was chaos. Congratulations from business associates, interview requests from every major publication, investment opportunities from people who suddenly wanted to partner with the architect now that she had a face. One email stood out. From Claire Morrison, sent 20 minutes ago. Victoria, board meeting scheduled for Monday, 9 a.m. to discuss Silvercrest integration strategy. Also, you should see this. Attached was a link to a New York Times article posted 17 minutes ago. The headline read, The architect revealed how Victoria Blake built a $38 billion empire in secret while married to the man who tried to partner with her. The article was surprisingly well-researched for something written so quickly. They'd found her foster care records from Boston, her scholarship to MIT, her first startup at 22 that failed spectacularly. Then the rise of Zenith, built from a $10,000 loan she'd secured by mortgaging her future earnings. The article painted her as a modern Horatio Alger story with a feminist twist. Self-made billionaire, hidden genius, woman scorned who came back swinging. It wasn't wrong exactly, but it wasn't complete either. It didn't mention the miscarriage, the years of quiet endurance, the specific shape of Marcus's cruelty. Those were hers to keep, Linda called as the Bentley crossed into Manhattan. Victoria, the press is going insane. Forbes wants a cover story. Fortune wants to do a deep dive on your investment strategy. CNBC wants you for a live interview Monday morning. Accept Forbes and Fortune. Decline CNBC for now. I need to focus on Silvercrest integration. Victoria watched the city skyline grow closer. But Linda, I want you to coordinate with our PR team. I want to control this narrative. No more mystery, no more shadows. If I'm stepping into the light, I'm doing it on my terms. Understood. Also, you should know, Silvercrest stock closed up 26%. Investors are thrilled about the leadership change. There's already speculation about which other companies Zenith might acquire. Victoria felt something loosen in her chest. Validation. The market had spoken, and it said she'd made the right call. Marcus's incompetence had been dragging Silvercrest down, and now everyone could see it. One more thing, Linda's voice carried hesitation. Marcus Harrington's LinkedIn has been updated. He listed himself as between opportunities and removed all mention of Silvercrest. Screenshot it. I want our legal team to verify he's not disparaging the company or claiming credit for deals he didn't close. Victoria's mind was already moving to risk mitigation. And Linda, pull the files on everyone who worked under Marcus in sales. I want to know who was complicit in his plagiarism and who was competent to spite him. Already in progress. Preliminary audit shows at least 3 junior analysts did the actual work Marcus took credit for. They're good, Victoria, really good. Promote them, double their salaries, and get me their names. I want to personally apologize for what they endured. The Bentley arrived at 157 Tower as the sun began its descent toward the Hudson River. The building's glass facade reflected the city in shades of gold and copper, beautiful and hard as the empire Victoria had built. Sebastian opened her door. Will you be needing anything else today, Madam Chairman? No. Go home, Sebastian. See your daughter. Today was difficult enough without making you work late. He nodded, but his eyes held concern. You did the right thing. All of it. I know. Victoria stepped out into the October evening. But knowing you did the right thing doesn't always make it feel good. The penthouse elevator required her thumbprint. As she rode up alone, Victoria caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. The white suit was pristine despite the day's emotional warfare. The makeup still perfect. The woman looking back at her was powerful, successful, vindicated. She looked nothing like the girl who'd aged out of foster care at 18 with $200 and a dream. The elevator doors opened directly into her home. Victoria walked through the foyer, past the contemporary art she'd collected, past the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed her city. She went to her bedroom, stripped off the Dior suit, hung it carefully in the closet among its equally expensive companions. In the bathroom, she washed off Sienna's war paint. The makeup came away in streaks of beige and red, revealing the face underneath. 32 years old, older than her years in some ways, younger in others. The face of a woman who loved and lost and learned. The hot water of the shower felt like absolution. Victoria stood under the spray until her skin turned pink, until the tension in her shoulders began to unknot, until she could breathe without feeling the weight of the day pressing on her chest. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a silk robe, she found her phone lit up with notifications. Most were congratulatory, some were opportunistic. One was from a number she didn't recognize. The text was short. I saw the news. I'm sorry for everything. You deserve better. Amber. Victoria stared at the message for a long moment. Then she blocked the number and deleted it. Some apologies came too late to matter. She poured herself wine, a 2015 Camus Cabernet, Marcus's favorite that he'd never shared, and walked to the windows. Manhattan glittered below, millions of lights against the gathering darkness. Somewhere in that city, Marcus and Diane were figuring out how to survive on $250,000 instead of millions, learning what it felt like to fall. Victoria raised her glass to the skyline. To honest endings, to expensive lessons, to the difference between passengers and pilots. The wine was excellent. She'd always had good taste. Marcus had just never bothered to notice. Her phone rang. Arthur's name on the screen. Tell me you're not working at 7 p.m. on a Friday. His dry chuckle came through. I could say the same to you. But actually, I'm calling with information you need to hear tonight rather than Monday morning. Victoria's stomach tightened. What happened? Richard Vanderpool was arrested 2 hours ago. The FBI moved up their timeline after seeing the media coverage. They were worried he'd flee. He's being held without bail pending arraignment Monday morning. And Amber? She's cooperating with investigators. Apparently, she's been keeping her own records of her father's business dealings for years, just in case. The prosecutors are calling her a star witness. Arthur paused. Victoria, she's claiming her father pressured her to pursue Marcus specifically to gain access to Zenith through Silvercrest. She's saying the whole relationship was orchestrated. Victoria absorbed this, trying to separate truth from convenient narrative. Do you believe her? I believe she was a victim of her father's manipulation. I also believe she made her own choices once she was involved with Marcus. Both things can be true. Will she face charges? Unlikely. Fabricating a degree isn't federal fraud, it's just garden variety lying. And she's a compelling witness who's turning on her father. The prosecutors will probably give her immunity. Victoria thought about Amber in that conference room, mascara running, everything she'd built her identity on, exposed as fiction. She'll have to rebuild her entire life. Yes, but at least she'll have the chance. Arthur's voice gentled. How are you doing? Today was necessary. Victoria cut him off before he could offer sympathy she didn't want. Difficult, but necessary. Marcus made his choices. I made mine. Now we all live with the consequences. After she hung up, Victoria stood at the window for a long time, watching the city breathe. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Integrating Silvercrest, managing the media narrative, rebuilding a company Marcus had nearly run into the ground. But tonight, she allowed herself to feel it all. The grief for the marriage that never really existed. The anger at the years wasted trying to be small enough to fit into Marcus's limited vision. The satisfaction of watching karma work with mathematical precision. And underneath it all, something else. Something that felt almost like hope. She was free now, free from pretending, free from diminishing herself, free from loving someone who'd never bothered to know her. The cost had been high, but some prices were worth paying. 6 months later, Victoria stood on a different stage. The Metropolitan Museum of Art's Temple of Dendur, transformed for Zenith's annual charity gala. 200 of New York's most influential people mingled beneath the ancient Egyptian architecture, drinking champagne that cost more per bottle than most people's monthly rent. Victoria wore black Carolina Herrera, elegant and understated. Her hair was down for the first time in public, falling in loose waves past her shoulders. The change was deliberate. She didn't need armor anymore. Everyone already knew who she was. A Forbes reporter approached, young and earnest. Miss Blake, you're being honored tonight for your foundation's work. 12 new pediatric cancer centers across the country. What inspired this particular focus? Victoria thought about the ultrasound photo she'd burned 6 months ago. The child that never was. The family she'd wanted so desperately that she'd been willing to erase herself to have it. I believe in second chances, in building something beautiful from loss. Children fighting cancer deserve every chance to survive, to thrive, to become who they're meant to be. The reporter scribbled notes. In the Second Chances Garden in Greenwich? That opened last month, correct? Yes. Community garden plots where families can grow their own food. A playground for children. Open green space in a neighborhood that had too much private property and not enough public good. Victoria smiled. Something positive growing where something toxic used to be. The reporter left to mingle. Victoria accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and surveyed the room. Linda was deep in conversation with a tech CEO about potential investments. Arthur was schmoozing with a federal judge. Claire Morrison held court near the fountain, dispensing wisdom to younger entrepreneurs. Miss Blake? Victoria turned to find a man she didn't recognize. Early 30s, auburn hair, slightly disheveled despite the formal setting, wearing a tuxedo like he'd been forced into it at gunpoint. His eyes were kind. That was her first impression. Gray eyes that looked like they'd seen suffering and chosen compassion anyway. I'm Dr. Nathaniel Sullivan. My colleague Claire Morrison said I should introduce myself, though I'm warning you, I'm terrible at these events. Victoria found herself smiling. Not for gallows or recognition, but for this. The actual concrete good that money could do when wielded with intention. Tell me about them. The children. His face transformed when he talked about his patients. The awkwardness fell away, replaced by fierce dedication. He described a 7-year-old girl with neuroblastoma, now cancer-free. A 10-year-old boy who'd needed experimental surgery that no other hospital would approve. A teenager who'd been told she'd never walk again, but was now in physical therapy. Victoria listened, asking questions, genuinely interested. When he paused for breath, she realized they'd been talking for 20 minutes and her champagne had gone warm. "I'm sorry, I'm monopolizing your time." Nathaniel looked embarrassed. "You probably have important people to talk to." "You're important. You save children's lives." Victoria set down her glass. "And you haven't asked me about my divorce, or my net worth, or whether I plan to acquire more companies. That makes you the most interesting person I've talked to all night." He laughed, surprised and genuine. "To be honest, I barely follow business news. I work 80-hour weeks. Claire told me you were the architect, but I don't really know what that means beyond very successful businesswoman." It was refreshing, disarming. Victoria felt herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months. "Well, Dr. Sullivan." "Nate, please." "Nate, since you're terrible at these events and I'm growing tired of them, would you like to get actual food? There's a Korean barbecue place in Koreatown that's open late. No champagne, no small talk, just good food and honest conversation." His smile reached his eyes. "I'd like that. Fair warning though, I'm a surgeon, so I'm probably going to talk about medicine and make terrible jokes about anatomy. I'm a private equity CEO, so I'm probably going to talk about markets and make terrible jokes about compound interest. We'll be insufferable together." They left through the side entrance, Victoria in her gown and Nate in his ill-fitting tux, both of them shedding the gala like uncomfortable skin. The city was alive around them, taxis honking, people laughing, the eternal movement of Manhattan at night. As they walked, Nate asked, "Can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask." "I might not answer." "The news said you were married to someone who worked at a company you took over, that you fired him the same day you divorced him. The internet has opinions." Victoria considered how much to share. "What's your opinion?" "I think the internet wasn't there. I think every relationship has two sides, and the public only sees one. And I think anyone who builds what you built probably had good reasons for her choices." It was the right answer. Not because it flattered her, but because it acknowledged complexity instead of demanding simple narratives. "His name was Marcus. I loved him once. He didn't love me. He loved the idea of me, the version that didn't threaten him. When I couldn't be that person anymore, when I chose myself over making him comfortable, it ended." Victoria looked up at the buildings towering around them. The business part was separate. He was incompetent. I was the majority shareholder. Math did the rest. "Do you regret it? Any of it?" "I regret staying as long as I did. I regret believing that love meant making yourself smaller. But I don't regret leaving, and I don't regret the consequences." She glanced at him. "Does that answer your question?" "Honestly, it makes me want to ask 1,000 more, but I'll settle for learning what you like on bulgogi." The restaurant was cramped and loud and perfect. They sat at a small table with a built-in grill, surrounded by the sizzle of meat and the chatter of late-night diners. Nate was right. He did make terrible anatomy jokes. Victoria found herself laughing more than she had in years. "Okay, your turn," Nate said, expertly flipping meat on the grill. "Worst business deal you ever made?" "There was a biotech startup in 2019. The CEO had an impressive pitch, great credentials, promising research. I invested 15 million and he'd faked all his data. The research was worthless. The whole company collapsed within 6 months." Victoria grimaced at the memory. "I lost every penny." "Ouch. How did you handle it?" "I bought his house, his car, and his reputation. Then I donated them all to actual, legitimate biotech research." She took a sip of soju. I don't like being made a fool of. Nate studied her with those kind gray eyes. You know what I notice? When you talk about your work, your whole energy changes. You're not performing, you're just present. Is that your professional medical opinion, Dr. Sullivan? It's my personal observation as someone who spends his life reading people to figure out how to help them. He poured more soju for both of them. You don't have to perform for me, Victoria. I'm not interested in the architect. I'm interested in the woman who builds cancer centers and turns toxic estates into community gardens. Something in Victoria's chest cracked open. Not painfully, more like ice thawing after a long winter. That's good, because I'm tired of performing. I did it for 2 years in a marriage that nearly destroyed me. I'm done pretending to be anything other than exactly who I am. And who are you? Victoria considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, she wouldn't have known how to answer. Now, sitting in a cramped Korean restaurant at midnight with a pediatric surgeon who hadn't Googled her net worth, the answer felt clear. I'm someone who learned that you can't love someone into seeing your worth, that some people will only respect you when you have power they want, that the quiet ones aren't weak, they're just waiting for the right moment to show their strength. Nate raised his glass. To the quiet ones, then, may they always find their moment. They drank. Around them, the restaurant continued its late-night chaos, but Victoria felt centered in a way she hadn't in years. This wasn't romance, not yet, maybe never, but it was honest. Two people with demanding careers and complicated pasts sharing overpriced meat and cheap soju at midnight. It was enough. When they finally left the restaurant at 2 a.m., Nate walked her to the waiting Bentley. Sebastian had been parked nearby for hours, never complaining, always patient. Can I see you again? Nate's question was tentative, like he expected rejection. No pressure. I know you're busy running empires and destroying enemies, but maybe coffee sometime? Or another late-night meal where we make terrible jokes? Victoria pulled out her phone. Give me your number. As he typed it in, she said, fair warning, I'm a workaholic who carries the scars of a bad marriage and has trust issues the size of Manhattan. I'm probably not the easiest person to date. I'm a surgeon with $200,000 in student debt who works 80 hours a week and once accidentally called my ex-girlfriend the patient during a fight. I'm not exactly a prize either. He handed back her phone. But maybe we can be complicated together. Victoria smiled. Maybe we can. She got into the Bentley and watched Nate walk away, hands in his pockets, slightly rumpled tux jacket catching the streetlight. He didn't look back. She appreciated that. Sebastian met her eyes in the rearview mirror. Good evening, Madam Chairman. Good evening, Sebastian. Unexpectedly good. As they drove through the sleeping city, Victoria's phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline made her pause. Marcus Harrington enrolls in community college business ethics course. Starting over, says disgraced former executive. There was a photo. Marcus on a community college campus, looking older and harder, but also somehow more real. The article mentioned he was working part-time at the coffee shop where he and Victoria had met, taking classes at night, trying to rebuild. Victoria stared at the photo for a long moment. She felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, no lingering affection, just the distant recognition of a problem that had solved itself. She deleted the alert and opened her calendar. Monday was packed. Board meeting, Silvercrest integration review, press interviews, foundation calls. The work never stopped. But now it was work she chose, work that mattered, work that built instead of diminished. Her phone buzzed again. A text from Nate. Made it home. Thank you for tonight. You're fascinating when you're not being the architect. Looking forward to more terrible jokes. N. Victoria typed back, same. Though my terrible jokes about compound interest are objectively worse than yours about spleens. Fair warning. His response came immediately. Challenge accepted. She smiled and put the phone away. The Bentley pulled up to 157 Tower. Victoria rode the elevator to her penthouse, the city falling away beneath her. When the doors opened, she walked through her home. The art, the view, the expensive silence. In her bedroom, she opened the drawer where the ultrasound photo had once been. Empty now, but she'd replaced it with something else. A printed photograph from the opening of Second Chance's garden. Children playing on swings, families planting tomatoes in raised beds. An elderly woman sitting on a bench where the Harrington Mansion's parlor once stood, feeding birds. Something beautiful where something toxic used to be. Victoria set the photo back in the drawer and went to the window. Manhattan glittered below, infinite and possible. She thought about Marcus, learning ethics at community college. About Amber, rebuilding her life away from her father's shadow. About Diane, downsized but still breathing. They were all getting second chances, even if they didn't deserve them. That was the difference between her and them. She believed in redemption, in the possibility of change, in the slow, difficult work of becoming better than you were. She just wasn't required to be present for their transformations. Victoria Blake, no longer Harrington, never again anyone's dim reflection, raised her glass of wine to the city one more time. To second chances, to honest endings, to building empires while the world sleeps and burning bridges that should never have been built in the first place. The wine was excellent. The view was hers. The future was unwritten. And for the first time in 2 years, Victoria Blake was exactly where she belonged.